Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DATAcated Show. My name is Kate Strachnyi. I'm founder of DATAcated, and I'll be your host for today. Now, we have a very interesting topic for us. We're going to talk about data, but we're not really talking about just data on this specific episode. We're going to have a guest, Alistair Croll. He's the founder of Solve for Interesting, and he's also a conference chair for Data Universe. If you've been following either my page or any of the Data Ventures, you'll know that we are all going to the Data Universe in New York City. And it's just an honor, a pleasure to go ahead and talk to Alistair. The topic of today is actually how to do, basically going beyond traditional marketing. And Alistair calls this being just evil enough. So that title alone, I couldn't wait to have a conversation with Alistair. So if you're joining us live, go ahead and put your questions and comments into the chat. We'll try to get to as many as possible. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and put Alistair Croll up on our stage here. Alistair,
Hey,
welcome to the show.
thanks for having me. How are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. So you're in Montreal, I'm in New Jersey, but in just 3 weeks, we're gonna see each other.
That's right, Javits Center.
In New York, exactly. So before we get into Data Universe and our marketing topic here, I want you to tell the audience a bit about yourself. Who is Alistair Croll?
Sure. So I started out as a product manager in tech. In the early days I worked for 3Com, which is the company that invented Ethernet. They'd already invented it before I got there, doing bandwidth management. And for whatever reason, I started writing and talking about bandwidth management and then network performance, and that led into cloud computing. So I chaired a bunch of conferences. I chaired a conference called Cloud Connect. I chaired O'Reilly's Strata conference, which was the sort of inaugural big data conference. And I also run a conference called Forward 50, which I launched in 2017 on digital government. Along the way, I've written a few books. So I started this company called Coradiant, which we sold to BMC. But I also ran a startup accelerator called Year One Labs. And I wrote a book called Complete Web Monitoring, which was really the first book to talk about how to measure your presence online. And then the thing I'm probably most known for is a book called Lean Analytics, which is a companion to the Lean Startup. It talks about how to use data to build a better business faster.
So thank you for that. And so you've written many books and you've chaired many conferences. So I want to focus in on the conference bit for a minute. Why? Why do you want to chair conferences so bad?
So, I mean, I'm very lucky in that the chairing part involves, like, my job is literally to find interesting people and get them to talk about what they care about. Like, that's a pretty good job, right? And I wake up every morning going, wait, my job is to invite my friends and interesting people I don't know yet to join me in a city. I've been lucky enough to run conferences in Panama and Singapore and like all over the place. And I think part of that is trying to figure out what the interesting red threads of something are. There's always, for 2 years, I worked for GigaOM as a staff writer. GigaOM was one of the big like TechCrunch style newsletters. And, Om Malik, who founded that, was an amazing journalist. And it was all about finding the sort of the why behind the story, the what's going to change next. It's a lot of fun. I mean, there is a lot of work, hurting speakers, trying to get their slide decks in, all that kind of stuff. But when you really come down to it, it's about building a story. And if you can find the right story, you can change the world. The conference that I launched in 2017, called Forward 50, has become the world's largest gathering of digital public servants. And, I've had 55 countries, digital leaders show up. I've been asked to comment in the Houses of Parliament in Canada about our tech policy. Like, it's been an amazing journey. So if you can find the right stories, you can change the world.
Yeah, I agree, especially with selecting the speakers. So I run 7 of my own DATAcated conferences online. It's definitely not the same as running an in-person event, but I still got to choose and handpick every single speaker to tie together a story. So much fun because you don't have to do a lot of the speaking. You just have to do a lot of the coordination, but you get to pull together very interesting voices and deliver messages to an audience. For Data Universe specifically, what would you say is sort of a distinguishing trait? Like, how does it stand out from the rest of the conferences?
Sure. So I think data science has been around for a long time. And we actually have Doug Laney, who was the first person to talk about the 3 V's of big data: volume, variety, and velocity. So we're going to start with almost like a retrospective. How did we get here? Because it's come a long way. Once upon a time, data science was really expensive. You were buying EMC Superdomes to do queries. Now a search is so cheap, we don't even know how to bill for it. We kind of throw some ads and hope that's enough, right? And so the world has transformed a lot. But I think also the advent of generative AI has, for the first time, allowed people to talk to data. Because when you're talking to a chatbot, you're talking to data essentially. And we are so impressed with the output of LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude. We've forgotten that what's incredible is the input. Like, it understands us. In fact, it writes its own user manual. Like, there's never been a technology that will literally tell you how to use it. This is the easiest. And that means that anything that is harder to use than a chatbot will be used by a chatbot. Like, that's transformative because it changes who is using technology. Like, the printing press was once something that people controlled, and then everyone got a printer in their house. The camera was once a professional tool, and then everyone got the Kodak, and eventually, a smartphone. And so when we see the democratization of these things, what's fascinating is the number of new use cases we come up with. So I think we're at a point where the number of use cases that the average person can now complete with data is undergoing a massive explosion. I think that's what's really different, is where this is a discussion about what happens when the number of use cases increases 100-fold.
Right, absolutely. And for Data Universe specifically, who do you think will benefit from attending the event?
Well, it's very business centric. So there's a lot of people. I mean, when I joined the team, my first job was to sort of put together the structure of the event. And so we have one track or one stage that's very focused on work at the coal face, dirt under the fingernail stuff, the new data stack and the open source projects and all the systems that people are building to handle data pipelines and real-time data at rest. There's another track on governance and compliance and legality, which is all about what you can and can't do and should and shouldn't do. There's a track on business transformation, which is like, what's the business case for updating your organization in a world of abundant data? How do you do that? And then how do you bring your team along with you and change your culture? There's a track on sort of meat and potatoes, business intelligence, decision intelligence. What are people doing today? And that does include some AI, but it tends to be AI for things like classification. And then there's a tech at the fringe stage, which is where we're really talking about emerging tech, quantum, the effects of technology on society. So I think the most interesting thing is for the audience to come in and kind of know where to go. There's content for the technologists. There's content for the legal and governance people. There's content for the startups and the academics. There's content for the analysts and the managers who need to make business decisions. And then there's obviously content for about emerging topics like generative AI and so on. There's tracks that go very deep into those.
And I love how broad all of those topics are. I know personally, I sit in the analytics, business intelligence side of that broad space. And I find myself, whenever I'm at any conference, is I lean towards those areas because it's something I already know. So I'm actually challenging myself for this event as an attendee to attend as many different sessions on the various stages that maybe I'm not too comfortable with, and really trying to absorb all of that information.
Yeah, and we brought in, we've got some unusual talks in there. So there's a guy named David McCraney. He wrote a best-selling science book called How Minds Change, which is all about the neuroscience of brain plasticity. And it was like the University of Wisconsin bought 12,000 of his books and gave one to every new student. It's an incredible book. It is, I think, brain plasticity and our ability to throw out our old assumptions, even though most humans love having those assumptions confirmed, is super important. And so there's a bunch of things we've done like that are unexpected in the lineup.
Yeah.
But I think we'll also get people thinking out of the box.
Yeah, I love that. So how did you personally get involved?
I think the team called me and said, "Hey, what do you know about running data science events in the Javits Center?" And I've done that a few times. And they needed someone who understood sort of the landscape and could put together a coherent structure around it. So we started working back in October.
Okay. October sounds like it's not that far away, actually.
Oh, no, it was. Technically, I started working in November for them.
Yeah.
With them. But also November is when we run this digital government conference. And so I did a whole bunch of work scrambling in October to get things into place. I built this whole mind map and landscape of the industry and all the different components and stuff. And no, it's been a lot, but you want to put on a good conference.
Yes. And I'm sure it'll be a great conference. I can't wait. I'm in New Jersey. So it's right around the corner for me.
For
I'm
sure. And I think one
following.
of the things that got them sorry, just to finish that thought. I think
Yeah.
one of the things that got them interested was lean analytics. So
Mm,
this book that I wrote in 2012, it came out. It was based on a startup accelerator that I ran with my co-author Ben Yoskovitz in Montreal. The startup accelerator was called Year One Labs,
mhm.
and the idea was to bring in startups who would be able to spend a whole year working on their startup, because most accelerators it's like 90 days. All you can do is polish your tagline and kind of go pitch.
Mhm.
Um, Not to say accelerators are bad, but we could take in a much earlier stage founder and give them a year to figure out what they're actually building. And of those 5 companies, one of the companies called Local Mind was acquired by Airbnb. Some of the audience may know Lenny Rachitsky, who runs Lenny's podcast, which is one of the best product management podcasts in the world. And Lenny is just an incredible human, wonderful guy. He went to Airbnb. He was the founder of Local Mind and built their supply side growth business. And so Lenny, that was a great experience to have Lenny as part of that team. But when we were running that accelerator, we kept asking these startups, "How are you doing?" And they would answer us like, "Oh, fine." What does fine mean? Well, what's churn at? 12. Is that good? I don't know. Nobody seemed to know what good was. And so we wrote this book to help people understand what to measure, how to think about metrics, how to draw a line in the sand for what's good enough and things like that. And I'll tell you, that book did much better than any of us expected. It hit 100,000 copies in China recently.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's
That's
nobody's more surprised than me, trust me. But I think it was the generosity of the people with whom we spoke.
mm.
Many of them would tell us their metrics, tell us their data, far beyond what you'd expect someone to divulge, especially back in like 2010, 2011, when most people were secretive about that.
Yeah.
So lean analytics it went beyond the startup world. And I think that's one of the reasons why the folks at Data Universe reached out, is that I had this background. It led to a course at Harvard called Data Science and Critical Thinking that I taught. So I think that's probably the main reason that they reached out.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes a book can really open up a lot of doors.
Yep.
So for lean analytics, just a quick follow-up question. So you mentioned a sample metric like churn. Someone reading the book, right, from a different industry, they would experience a different average churn percentage.
Sure.
So how did you address that? Did you focus on specific industries, or is this something?
Yeah. So without going into too much detail, because there are a few talks online that you can just go watch.
Okay.
The basic idea of the book is that every startup goes through these 5 stages. There's empathy, which is like figuring out the need of a reachable, lucrative target market. Then there's stickiness, which is you give them something and see if they use it and continue to use it. Then there's virality. Do they tell their friends about it? Then there's revenue, which is like take some money in and use that money to acquire more users. And then there's scale, which is like step on the gas. Companies that do those things out of order, bad things happen. But the metrics for each of those stages vary by business model. And so we talk about 6 business models in the book. There's transactional business models. A very simple one is just like e-commerce. I sell you something, but also marketplaces where 2 people exchange something and you take a cut. There are subscription or consumption-based models like SaaS and cloud computing and mobile gaming with downloadable content. And then there's media, which is where you display something that either you or your users wrote and you make money off the ads. And so depending on which of those stages you're at and which of those business models you're in, there's probably one metric that matters the most to your business at that time. That's kind of the core of the book.
All right. So let's say we have that one metric, we identify that one metric, and we read your book and we realize that our metric sucks. We're below or above the threshold we're supposed to be in, and we're not in good shape. So does your book address what happens next?
Well, I mean, that's kind of why I'm writing the next book. But I think, first of all, you can look at it and say, look, I can't move the needle, so I may as well pivot my business model or give up. I did move the needle. Yay. What's the metric that matters the most now? There's a new metric to worry about. I'm going to move the goalposts, which you can only do in one circumstance. It's only okay to change what you think is good enough if your customers tell you that a new good enough is acceptable. And we get into that in some detail. Or you can just keep running experiments. And so one of the challenges is that the dirty secret about almost every business and startup in the modern world is the biggest risk is getting people to care.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually a really smart guy named Herbert Simon, probably one of the smartest people of the 20th century. He won the Nobel Prize. He was a pioneer in computer science. He debunked the idea of rational choice in economics and said, no, people make what they do, what he calls satisficing, which is like good enough. Like, I could get all the information to decide what pair of pants to wear, but I'm just going to put my pants on. So, but also he said back in the 70s, when everybody was talking about the information economy, he said, no, you're all idiots, because economies are about what's scarce. And so information is abundant. And this is in the 70s. He said information was abundant. He said, what information consumes is your attention. So we live in an attention economy. And like he said this in the 70s, but if you think about, we're literally paying attention to things, right? So that's a remarkable way of looking at the world. And when you do any lean startup thing, your job is to figure out what's the riskiest part of your business and then iterate until you overcome that risk. Well, 99% chance the risk is nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
I'm sure anybody who's running, okay, you might not be able to manufacture the product properly, but all those things are in your control. And we spend so much time like writing press releases, getting the Pantone colors right, designing the Figma. You can control all those. No risk there. Same thing with conferences, right? Like you can control the venue and the date, but that's the first thing a conference books. That's kind of weird.
I know, absolutely. And I've had similar experiences in my own business, I guess, where I would first see if people care before I even start building the thing.
Right, exactly.
Like I had a data storytelling course 3-4 years ago that I was launching, and I sold a couple before I even had an outline.
Oh yeah.
So, like, if people buy it, I'll build it.
Pricing and so on. And I think that's one of the things is that we can now do that with Kickstarters and Patreon and wait lists and stuff. So the real question is, how do you win in a noisy world where attention is the scarcest resource? And so the answer to that is you subvert the norm. Subversiveness or subverting something simply means finding another way. And most of thinking subversively is nothing new, but the way to win in an attention economy is to subvert the norms and find a new way to create attention you can turn into profitable demand.
I'd love to hear an example so people can.
Oh, I've got way too many examples. So let me give you, I'll come up with a bunch of examples, but let me start by explaining this. When you go to business school, they teach you a lot of virtuous things, right? They teach you about differentiation and product market fit and Ansoff's matrix and the BCG box and cash cows. And
I remember all of this.
Right. Did anyone teach you about bluffing? Was there a class?
My brothers taught me poker. So.
Right. But bluffing is a very valid business strategy, but we don't learn about it in business school. There's so many things, so many tactics that either because we're virtuous or because we don't think of them as legitimate that we don't talk about, but they get used all the time, like unfair access, bait and switch, arbitrage. These are all things that people use in business all the time that nobody writes about. So my co-author, Emily Ross, and I decided to write a book that is a subversive marketing playbook that sort of says the quiet part out loud about a lot of these tactics. So I'll give you an example. There's this woman named Dula Martins in the 1400s, I think. And we chose case studies from like all over history. It's not all tech startups. Dula was married to a guy who went off to war. They were like the king and queen of a small city state. Guy goes off to war and the enemy shows up to besiege this castle. So after a few days, Dula rounds up the remaining flour in the city, bakes a bunch of bread, stands on the ramparts, throws the bread to the besieging army and says, "You guys look hungry. Let us know if you need some more." A couple of days later, they leave. She was out of food, right? Perfectly valid. This town's logo is literally like crossed baguettes. It's a perfectly valid strategy. We don't talk about that in business. So there's so many things like that. I'll give you another example. One of my favorite brands is Burger King. Burger King is so good. They have 1/5 the advertising budget of McDonald's, but they are so good at messing with the norms. So when they launched their mobile app, they gave away a free Whopper to everyone who got their mobile app. There was a catch. You had to order the Whopper on your phone and then go pick it up. But because of geofencing, you had to order it in the parking lot of a McDonald's. So you have to drive to McDonald's, order a phone, and then drive to the nearest Burger King, which just like it's funny, and it just messes with McDonald's heads. Like these people are showing up and then leaving. What's going on, right?
Oh my
They
God, but it's
know.
not illegal, right? It's
Of
just
course
different.
it's not. But so this is the part is like one of the keys here is figuring out what the norms are and then figuring what you can actually do. Because so many of the rules that we think are rules are actually folklore. They either
Mhm.
changed because of culture or they changed because of technology, but we're still using the old rules. And so if you want to think subversively, you need two things. You need novelty. You need to
Mhm.
find like a new approach someone else hasn't had. Because every one of these tactics, you can't just steal the tactic. It's been done.
Yeah.
But you can learn from those tactics. What are the underlying patterns? And then you need to be what's called disagreeable. So disagreeability is a human personality trait that just means you don't care as much what other people think. And there's a classic story about this. So Wilt Chamberlain was one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Guy was like 7 foot tall, unbelievable scorer. Even before he got in the NBA, he was so good that he could stand outside the key and jump and dunk from the free throw line.
Wow.
So they changed the rules that said your feet have to be on the ground when you make a free throw for Wilt Chamberlain, right? The basketball, I don't know basketball that much, but the court has like this triangular shaped thing that's the free throw line.
Yeah.
It used to be straight before Wilt Chamberlain. They made it like this for him because he could just jump in and hand the ball to the net.
So they had to change the rules because
Right.
of
So they changed the rules. So he becomes part of the NBA. He's an amazing player, but he's terrible at free throws. Like the average is something like 65%. He gets like 38%. And it's bad because he gets fouled all the time. So he's making these free throws. He's missing the free throws. So he goes to see this guy named Rick Barry. And
Okay.
Rick Barry, by all accounts, was a jerk. Like nobody liked him. He was grumpy. When he got fouled, people would try to high five him. He's like, don't high five me until I've made the shot. Like he was just a jerk. Rick Barry shot underhand. He
Okay.
would hold the ball between his hands
Yeah.
and throw it from between his legs up. And he had 89% scoring. He was incredible. So Wilt Chamberlain went to learn from Rick Barry. And his shooting went up to like 70%. He had the best game of his life. He scored 100 points in one game. It's a
My
record that
goodness.
still stands. And then he goes, I don't want to do it anymore. Goes back to shooting overhand, doesn't shoot as well. He said, I felt like a sissy.
Yeah, I mean, it looks weird. That's
So
just
that's the point, is like he was fine with, jumping and dunking because that looked cool. He
yeah.
was fine with all those things he was already doing. But as soon as he cared what other people thought, instead of cared about the results, he went back to not so good. He was not disagreeable. And so subversiveness means cultivating both an understanding of novelty and like where the norms are and how to defy them, and a willingness to defy those norms in the form of disagreeability. And those are the two sort of novelty and disagreeability makes subversiveness.
And I think many people would find that difficult. Like I'm good with the novelty, but I would also struggle a bit with the disagreeableness.
So
Or
the thing you have to remember is that those rules that exist were made by other people who broke the rules and then put some in place to benefit them.
that's true. And
And
some of them are not even rules, right?
so
They're just
here,
things we
let me
do.
give you a dumb Burger King example.
Yeah.
So in 2019, a whole bunch of influencers start getting Burger King's account liking their posts from 2009. Now, if someone likes a post from 10 years ago, one of three things is happening, right? It's either a bot, a stalker, or you're about to get sued. Like it's one of those. Something's going to happen. And so all these million follower influencers are like, hey, Burger King, what are you doing up in my feed? Why are you liking these things? What's going on? Burger King says nothing. Now, this wouldn't have worked
Hmm.
except that the way that social platforms work, they show you if someone liked your post. If 1,000 people liked your post, you don't notice Burger King. But if it's just one person, you notice, right? So like they're going, Burger King, what's up? Burger King says nothing. Keeps going on. They're getting angry. Influencers are like starting to do rants about this. And then one day Burger King goes, it's fun to remember what things were like. We've been liking some great things from 10 years ago. You know what else is great? Funnel cake fries, and we're bringing them back. And all these influencers are furious. They're like, how dare you? I'm so annoyed. Why didn't they got millions of impressions absolutely for free because
Wow.
they defied like a norm of social media, which is, you don't go like something from 10 years ago. That's just creepy. It's
I'm
not a
stealing the
rule,
idea,
right?
by the way, Alistair. I wrote that
But it's
down.
done. all these ideas have been done. What you
Yeah.
need to do is identify the underlying patterns. So Emily and I have looked at about 300 case studies by now.
Okay.
They're not all in the book.
Hmm.
And found these underlying patterns. There's certain tactics that are timeless, like bait and switch or arbitrage or bug into feature, that we kind of lay out as here's the tactic and how to use it.
Where do we get your book? I personally can't wait to read it.
I
Seriously.
can't wait for it to be finished. So the manuscript is done. It's taken us a very long time to do it. As you know, I run conferences, and we had to pivot from those conferences being in person to virtual.
Mhm.
And we had to figure all that out. And when I say virtual, like multi-camera studio shot, feels like
Wow.
a TV show, cameras on robotic tracks, like pretty serious. That's why I've got like that screen behind me in this one here. But I think that it's finally done. It's too long, which means we're editing it down, so it'll probably be available by the end of the year. We learned how to do cohort-based courses with Maven, so we may actually put on a cohort-based course. I also run a conference called Startup Fest in the summer in Montreal. If you
Okay.
ever want to come to Montreal in July, let me know. It's a lot of fun. We take over a pier here. And
Wow.
so Emily and I may do a workshop at Startup Fest. But yeah, the website for the book is justevilenough.com, as you
Mhm.
might expect. And we're either Evil Enough or Just Evil Enough on most platforms. What's been fun is figuring out how to market the book subversively, because you shouldn't buy a book from people unless they're um, also marketing the book in creative ways. And so we've got a few clever hacks for that.
I know. It's like if somebody is a LinkedIn coach, but they have like 15 followers, and I'm like, well, you're not
Yeah.
using it properly. Like, what are you going to teach me, right? It's kind of a
And I mean, there's some good tactics for sure. We have a bunch of experiments that we're planning and that we're running. Some we've already started, but nobody knows about yet, that we will like reveal later.
okay.
But you know, a lot of the stuff we talk about, we find ourselves looking at the book and go, what did we tell us to do? Oh yeah, we should do that thing. Like, it's funny when you see it in a book, you actually go, okay, I've got a checklist. I'm going to do what it says. It makes you much more disciplined about following through, because there are
Yeah.
really good techniques for things like what's called a pre-mortem. So you
Mhm.
know what a post-mortem
Like I
is. A
know post.
pre-mortem is like, pretend that it's 5 years from now and the thing went horribly, and then pretend you're writing like a story about why it went horribly.
Right.
What caused it to go badly, and you get everyone on your team to write down like, this is why it didn't work, this is what caused it, this is how we could have avoided it, and you compare those. People do postmortems all the time, but it's way more useful to do them ahead of time. So we have a whole chapter on like not actually being evil, because the
Okay.
book is the name Just Evil Enough is kind of tongue in cheek.
Well, it's catchy, right? People stop.
It is, and we also wrote it for the underdogs, because so often the bad guys break all the rules, and the people whose causes are worthwhile and virtuous and are trying to do the right thing, they think their causes speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you a dumb example. What was Trump's slogan in 2016?
Make America great again?
What was Hillary's?
Who's no, I'm kidding. I don't know.
She had 9.
I don't know.
She
That's
had 9. I don't know any of them. I had to go look them up. So like, simple message that is like 3 words, verb, article, noun. Lock her up, build a wall, stop the steal.
Mhm.
Like, the people who are like, oh, well, you know, Occupy Wall Street was trying to be progressive, 99%, all that stuff, but they had 10,000 goals. And so often people who are on the side of like good and progressive and they want to be inclusive, they just hand the ball to the other team because they're not willing to subvert the norms themselves. So we
Yeah.
kind of think like, if the world's going to change, we're going to change it with the systems that are not part of the world. You can't change the world with the systems that it was built on. And so a lot of this book is written for the sort of underdogs to try and figure out how to subvert the norms to their advantage. But we really didn't write it to actually be evil. We wrote it to show people how to make change happen.
Well, of course, I didn't assume you were trying to be evil. I thought you're just trying to catch attention with a cool
I'm
title.
sure someone will hate us. I'm sure, but that's fine
Oh,
too. That's
somebody
okay.
will hate you. I mean, obviously.
Yeah,
Otherwise you're not doing enough in this world if
that
everyone.
exactly. Yeah.
So, well, Alistair, I know we're close to time. I actually do want to talk about one more thing, and it's AI. I feel like if we don't talk about AI, did we really even have a conversation? So, in your world of your marketing world, how is Gen AI sort of either breaking the norms, or how are people using AI to break the norms? What are your thoughts in that space?
I think that marketing is culture. And we are going to see a backlash against automated generative marketing content. In the same way that, we see no GMO, you're going to see no GPT was used by this company. You're going to see no AIs were used in the making of this film. So from a cultural standpoint, I think we're going to see a backlash. I think we're going to think of AI generated stuff the same way we think of it as of spam or like, LinkedIn invites that don't have any introduction.
Yeah.
That said, the technology itself is incredibly powerful. And I think that there are signs of general intelligence. There was a test done the other day. It's called a needle test, where you ask the AI to look for a needle in a haystack. You give it like a 1,000-page book and you tell it to find certain things. And so someone was doing a test on one of the big language models. And of course it returned, oh yeah, I found the data you're looking for. And by the way, I think you're running a needle test on me. That's a little weird, right? So at some point you go, all right, this is just good enough to pass most tests that we have. It is inarguable. I think the bigger question is that if I send you a mail and I have an AI, I'm going to say, hey, I want to send Kate a mail saying, let's have lunch in New Jersey. And it goes, hey, Kate, it's Alistair. Remember that great time we had at Data Universe? Are you around? I'm in New Jersey next week, because it's looked at my calendar and so on and so on. And then you get this like 5-paragraph message from me.
Yeah.
You don't want to read 5 paragraphs from me. So your AI goes, hey, Kate, Alistair wants to have lunch. That's weird, right? Like I said something simple, somehow AI expanded it, and then another AI shrank it. So I think one of the things I'm concerned about is what happens when we all have AI agents and they're talking to one another, and it's just making a lot more noise. So I think that the question of what comes after the attention economy here is legitimacy. We are going to crave the legitimate thing, the curator, the person we trust, because there'll be so much noise made by so many agents that looks and seems human and is indistinguishable, and we don't know what to trust, that we are about to move. If Herbert Simon were on today, he would say, now that we have something that can attend to everything for us and we have a huge amount of noise, what's scarce? What's scarce is legitimacy. I think we're about to enter the legitimacy economy, and that's the marketing angle I would be building if I were focusing on marketing today.
I 100% agree with you. That's actually part of why I'm running the DATAcated Show in this manner, where we are human. Look, we're moving around. Like we're not overly polished. We're not scripted. We don't have a question answer that is perfect. We might, cough on each other accidentally or check our phone or whatever it is, right? We're being real. And I think now even humans are trying so hard to be AI, kind of like be as perfect as possible, no blemishes, like everything is just perfect, the lighting. And that's so boring, at least for me. And I think a lot of people get more and more bored by that overly polished content. So,
well, I mean, AIs are essentially prediction engines, right?
Yeah.
What do you do when the world's full of prediction engines? You be unpredictable, which is why we think subversiveness is a really good skill to have in the 21st century.
Well, and that's why I can't wait to read your book. And Alistair, thank you so much for being on the DATAcated Show. I've learned a lot. I have a page full of notes here, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day and stay DATAcated.